Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Diaphone. As you guys know, I've been on the grind to become the #1 Bridget, and I want to share with you some of the tips and tricks to Strive's matchups that I've picked up along the way. You know, I actually take inspiration for this video from a video Ramlethal did, basically kind of describing a few keys to being each character, and I kind of want to format my video very similarly. So we'll go through the roster and talk about what I think are the essential points in order to play the matchup. The other thing I want to say is, like, you know, how I think of matchups is, I think the key to approaching any matchup is to look at where your character is stronger as opposed to the opponent, right? So, you know, Bridget's strengths are obviously like in neutral, like in that 5H, 5S range, and, you know, also mixing up the opponent, or it could be, you know, throwing orb and mobility, right? So some matchups you're going to want to focus more on pokes, some you're going to want to focus more on rushing down, some you're going to want to focus more on like your mobility and orb usage. So yeah, you'll kind of see a little bit of that in this video as well. So let's get started.
Versus Anji Mito.
All right, so alphabetical order, I guess. So let's start with Anji. The key in this matchup is to win neutral and play around spin. I think spin is very important to play around because the thing about spin is it beats your main pokes, right? So something like that gets punished. Something like this gets punished. Right? So yeah, you want to be using 5S and 5H and 2S a lot less in this matchup because, again, it's a lot scarier. But I think 236S usage is really, really strong in this, right? Because not only will it trigger that and then you get to press your advantage after the spin, but even let's say you have this out and then you do this, you're also plus after the spin. So even if they spin the orb or they spin your roll, you're at advantage. So I really like to make sure to focus on that. I also think, you know, doing stuff like 2P just to check the spin so you're a little safer is really important. 2P, 5P, 5K just to stop that forward movement is a lot more important than, you know, throwing out those big buttons. One other tip is, you know, you are one of the characters blessed enough to have a DP. So after Fujin, don't be afraid to let that DP rock because it pretty much beats all the follow-ups that he has. Except he has to like sit there and block, and then he has this pressure. So it's pretty important to make sure you utilize that. As for round start, I usually just stick with 5P. I try not to be too committal because, again, a round start spin will blow up some of your slower options like, you know, 2S and 5H.
Versus Axel Low.
Okay, so Axel. I think the key against Axel is obviously to get in, but in order to stop his 5P. His 5P is a really dominating poke against Bridget, right? It stops like pretty much everything you want to do as a Bridget player. I think the first thing you need to focus on is how to shut down that 5P. And my preferred method is whiff punish it with a 5H. And while you might not necessarily get the punish, you can check him for doing something else. Like, let's say you could check him for doing another 5P or a 2H. And once you get this counter hit, right, you confirm into sweep, and Axel's defense is bad. You just mix up off of this, you know, go into wall slump, and Axel has a really bad time, right? So the reward off of 1-5H is really, really strong, and I like to focus on doing 5H in this matchup. And another thing that I think you'll get used to as Bridget is, you know, Axel's doing this move, and it's really strong, ID back JS, but you have a few options, right? You can try a 6P, and that 6P trade is in your favor. The other thing you can do is similar to a 5P, is you could try to check the landing like that, right? You can try to check certain landings with either scooter, same kind of idea with like, if they whiff a 2H, can't necessarily punish the 2H, but you know, you can at least kind of check them with a scooter. You're plus on that scooter, you can kind of use that to get in. So you're basically looking for him to whiff and capitalizing on that. Maybe not necessarily whiff punishing, but punishing what they might do afterwards, right? One of Axel's other best pokes, 2H. You do have some good options against this. So if he does 2H into Rensen, you can IED over that. You know, get a full punish. Your ID reaches really far. That's a nice privilege of Bridget's. The other thing is if they just don't cancel this because they're afraid of the punish, you actually get a knockdown. Now, obviously, it only works at certain distances, but you can use this like meta to deter him from doing 2H as well. And as for round start, honestly, Axel does really well round start, but your 2P is actually pretty decent. It beats Axel 2P round start, and you're kind of plus on whiff versus Axel 5P. But most of the time, you kind of have to respect his round starts. His buttons, they're just better than yours round start. So wait for them to get pushed out and then take your advantage afterwards.
Versus Baiken.
All right, so Baiken's next, and I'm not a big fan of this matchup. A lot of Bridget's aren't, and I think the reason is a lot of tools that typically counter Baiken, Bridget doesn't have, including Invincible Super or a lot of like projectile Oki in order to beat the parry. A couple other things that are kind of weird in this matchup. So you don't have a really good counter for Escabari. You kind of just have to jump out. Same thing with like a space tatami. You can't really get a good punish on that, right? So look at the space tatami. You try to press any of your buttons, like a lot, like Baiken in the Mirror Magic, for example, you can press 5S. All your moves have like really extended hurt boxes, so you can get like a trade. It's not a very good situation. You obviously can't reversal super either because you don't have one. And again, Escabari, the best option I found out is just like try to jump out, because if you do like a 6P like a lot of characters can, you'll clash, and Baiken has better clash options and it just doesn't work well in your favor. That being said, you do have some counterplay in this matchup. The key in this matchup is you win neutral, and you can often bring neutral to a knockdown, and the issue is Baiken's parry is very effective against Bridget. So I think the key to this matchup is learning how to play around parry, and you have a few different ways to do that, right? Obviously your grab, your command grab, all will beat parry, but you have to also like think of ways that will beat mash and parry. That's like kind of the holy grail, and obviously grab, command grab does not beat mash. So a few examples, like let's say after this knockdown, right, your typical mix-up will just get parried, but what you can do is you can do like IED back, right, and do something like that, and you get a full combo. It also kind of counts as a mix as well, which is really nice too. You can also do something like a delayed low, although this is one hard, but two, like it's inconsistent, right? So I usually stick to the parry save. Once I've conditioned them to not parry, then I'll go for additional mix-up. A couple other setups, right? If you get the this in the corner, you can just throw the yo-yo, and that will beat the reversal parry and reversal mash. Another thing you can do is just like off of like a knockdown like this, you can't really get a meaty because you're gonna get parried. So what I like to do is you can do like a slightly delayed 5S, but that loses the mash, or you can just like stop the skewer short and go for something like a 2H, and then obviously they just die after this. So yeah, you have some good options to play around parry, but the important thing is you really need to play around parry, because you're gonna get that knockdown, right? Whether from a 6P or just whiff punishing, something that Baiken does, and it's really important you have to convert that knockdown into good damage.
Versus Bridget.
I don't really have any much tech for this matchup, right? I think the key in this matchup is just be better. Like, honestly, seriously, every Bridget I've played against, like, it usually comes down to like who could do the better mix-up, who can convert their combos better, who can drop less stuff. Yeah, not really too much tech. I think there's this weird thing going on, like where the yo-yo is really good in neutral, right? Because if they want to like flip in and do this, the best response to block yo-yo is doing their block yo-yo. That like stops everything, and even if they just block, the yo-yo goes away. So there's like this kind of like game of chicken, like who can yo-yo first. And if I don't think they're gonna go in, then you can throw this yo-yo and then press your advantage, because that yo-yo, you know, will give you a little more flexibility in neutral. But yeah, other than that, there's not really too much to talk about here. Just be better.
Versus Chipp.
All right, so Chipp, I actually think Bridget does okay in this matchup. You have a decent ability to keep him out, as opposed to like Axel, where Axel has like really good air coverage, but maybe not as like good of ground coverage and conversion from the ground coverage as Bridget. Chipp's more of a grounded character, right? So you can kind of control him a little bit better than, let's say, Millia, who's gonna take more to the air. So I think 5S is like your key button in this game. Again, when I distinguish between using 5S and 5H, I think characters that can whiff punch really easily, fast characters like Chipp, or characters that are going to try to take to the air and air dash, I think 5S is your superior button, right? So in this matchup, I like to do a lot of 5S. It's pretty much impossible for Chipp to whiff punch that unless they're like really looking for that. And then once you kind of get them looking for the 5S whiff punch, you can start doing other things. You know, just throwing the orb and doing JH is just pretty strong against him. He doesn't have a very good counter. He has to do like run up 6P, and even then that will beat stuff. Or you can just wait for the 6P and then you can, you know, whiff punish with 5S and kind of start your game, right? I think the other thing is I don't like taking DPs from characters like Chipp, because their offense is just so explosive, right? So I would say, like, when you're doing these kind of like mix-ups, try to focus on making a DP safe, you know, DP safe jump from the 2K2D, or even when you get like a regular knockdown like this, try to like, you know, be a little more respectful on DP than you would some other characters.
Versus Faust.
All right, so Faust, I think the key against Faust is obviously just to get in. Particularly, I think you need to stop this move. I think this move beats a lot of what Bridget wants to do, right? You would think that like a 5H would check him pretty well, but he just goes over the 5H. He goes over the 5S, or he's going to counter at the startup, right? So very important to talk about counterplay for this. So a couple things you can do. Let's say most Faust will do this in the bomb bag. And you can punish this actually pretty hard. Like I can take a wall break here if I wanted. Against Faust, I wouldn't take the wall break because you want to keep him, you know, keep the pressure on him. The other reason you don't want to like favor 5S and 5H is, of course, he can duck the poke. So what do you do here? Well, I'll poke more with 2S because that will stop the crawl. This is like the only matchup I'll use 6H in neutral. The 6H is the anti-Faust button. It works pretty well against drill. Try that at your own risk. I found it somewhat effective. 6H in neutral, Fario? Are you for real? Catches him going for drill. I feel like 6P is safer, but you know what? Fuck it. Oh shit, you're right. We figured out the tech, boys. And the other thing is, so try to focus on whiff punishing, right? So if a character is doing stuff like this, try to use this as your opportunity to get in, right? And like try to find ways to scooter in. You can also try to throw orbs at him too. It's usually good to like just preempt the stuff, but you have to be really aware of the scalpel. The scalpel is very good, so it's kind of important, you know, right? You can just 6P that. A lot of characters don't have this, where they can 6P you from like half screen and get a knockdown. So you really need to take advantage of how good this is against Faust. And of course, if it whiffs like that, you know, try to like find your way to scooter in or something like that. But you know, this is kind of the call out to some of your far pokes and some of your things. So I guess in summary, you know, focus on stopping J2K, whether it's just blocking or try to throw out something preemptive that beats it. Yeah, make sure you stop Scalpel and try to find ways to scooter in and make that scooter plus and get the advantage off that scooter. Then just mix them up after that.
Versus Giovanna.
All right, so let's talk about Giovanna. So the thing about Giovanna is making her work really hard to get in. So Giovanna is another one of those characters that her whiff punch game is really good. So she's going to be in this range kind of looking for a 5H. And your goal is to, you know, not give it to her, right? So focus more on this 5S. And eventually she's going to want to try to do something like this spiral arrow to get in. And I think this is the key of the matchup is stop this spiral arrow. So you have a really, really good punish on this, which you just 5K on reaction, and depending on the distance, yeah, you get really good damage. That's something that a lot of characters don't really get, but she's gonna want to do this to kind of call out the yo-yo. So it's kind of this game where you can, like, you know, obviously press buttons to kind of stop her from doing that, but then when you try to do the yo-yo, she's gonna spiral arrow. So what I like to do is play like really reactive, try to focus on like getting that spiral arrow, hitting that 5K, and then kind of getting your knockdown off that. And if they start playing more passively, then, you know, throw out your orb and abuse. One other thing about this matchup is you'll probably see this block string from Geos, where they'll do the spin dog into the flip dog. I don't know what these moves are called. Don't fall for temptation like me and press 2S, because you just die if you press 2S, right? Focus on doing this into 2K, get the knockdown, and, you know, go for mix, right? For round start, I think you want to sometimes check their dash, because a lot of Geos are going to be really aggressive, I found, round start. So I either try to like check a dash of 5P, and if not, I just want to back off, right? Your goal as Bridget is to just kind of get to neutral, so you can mix up between air dash back or just regular back dash or button or just block, and make it really hard for them to predict what you're going to do, just to, you know, get them to neutral and then start your zoning game.
Versus Goldlewis Dickinson.
All right, so Goldlewis, as you guys know, I am not a fan of this character, but I actually think Bridget does pretty well, and I'm very blessed to play a character that, you know, has a decent matchup against Goldlewis. One of the reasons I think this matchup is good is a preemptive 2H is really good against this character, right? He can't like really avoid the range of 2H, and even just like run up 2H is really obnoxious for Goldlewis to deal with. And you also have the range to whiff punch him. So something like this, let's say they're doing Typhoons from this range, right? That's the easy whiff punch into full knockdown, and Goldlewis defense isn't the best, so you can kind of run your mix up on him, right? So the game plan is try to make him overcommit, and when he's not overcommitting, do stuff like run up 2H in order to stop like jump-ins and stop a lot of the stuff that Goldlewis wants to do. A couple other interesting things about this matchup. So as you guys know, this drone is pretty obnoxious, especially at level 3. Bridget has a really good counter to this. You can just react to a drone, and if you're fast enough, you get a punish. But even if you're not fast enough, let's say you have boomer reactions like me, and he's already covered, it still just deletes the drone, and you're plus a lot after that, right? You can even take this a step further, where you react to a drone, you throw this, and then you throw this, and then if they're like caught in the middle, the orb will come back, and then you're really plus, and you get to start your pressure, right? So even though it's 50 meter, I think it's very important to stop that level 3 drone, and you can kind of take your turn off of it. And the other thing is, yeah, his defense is not that good. His buttons are really slow, so he's really susceptible to stuff like this, right? So like throwing the orb in the corner and then doing like 2H, he has a really hard time getting out of that. So again, use the slowness on offense and neutral, and use that to steamroll. You might have to get a few more hits than he does, but you have the advantage to do that. And for round start, as with most characters, your 5P is just really good. He has a really hard time calling out. You think like a lot of characters can call this out with 6P, but unfortunately Goldlewis doesn't quite have the best 6P, so you can abuse 5P a little bit more than you would against other characters. But of course he has counters. He could just, you know, wait and whiff punish you like that.
Versus Chaos.
All right, so Happy Chaos. I think the key to this matchup is doing really good offense and sticking on him in offense. So what does this mean? So in neutral, it's kind of tough. I think scooters are a very good option to counter a lot of what Happy Chaos does. So if Happy Chaos has a curse, right, just react the scooter and try to check him after he's doing something. And you can react to a couple other things with scooter as well. I think these buttons are really strong as well against Happy Chaos, although he can low profile them with 2K, which honestly isn't the worst thing. But again, it's Happy Chaos. He's really strong. He's eventually going to get on you. He's going to do really strong offense, or he's just going to zone you out. So the key is, before you get started, get that knockdown, and then once you get him in the corner, I think this is the essential character to learn wall slump setups against. Right? There's a lot of different setups you can do. But yeah, as you can see, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with Bridget and wall slump, and I think if you really want to optimize this matchup, it's learning those wall slumps in order to keep in the corner until you get super, and then abuse the super knockdown that you get with Bridget. Another thing, if we're going to talk about theory crafting, I don't know if you guys know this, because I just learned this yesterday. So a lot of Happy Chaoses love the YRC because his pressure off of YRC is just, it's insane, and he doesn't have a reversal super option, right? So, you know, a lot of people YRC this 5S, but Bridget has an automated way to beat this. So you have to look at your inputs, but basically what you're doing, you're canceling this 5S into a jump, and then you FD. And if you do the FD at the right time, it'll actually just cancel into normal like that. So you might be wondering like, all right, what's the point? Well, if they happen to YRC, your FD just automatically comes out. It's really cool. I'm still trying to get this down in the match, but I have a feeling that the Happy Chaos matchup would be like the #1 most important matchup to get this down. And as for round start, I do not like 5P round start. I think your best option is let Happy Chaos whiff something and then get a whiff punish, right? So a lot of Happy Chaoses will do like 2S, or they'll do 5S. You don't really get much off 5P. So what I like to do is just kind of walk back and then try to whiff punish the normal that they do with 5S or a 5H.
Versus Eno.
All right, so Eno, my other former main. I think Eno's tools are really well suited to dealing with Bridget. HCL is really strong, and even dive kick and stroke are really strong because Bridget doesn't really have a way to cover both those options, unlike some characters that can, like a Soul 2S, that can cover both the air approach and the grounded stroke. Neutral's kind of a crapshoot. You kind of have to play RPS, predict what they're going to do, and call it out. And eventually you're going to get hit. And I think the key is playing really good defense. So again, it's knowing the appropriate responses for after dive. I like to 6P. Appropriate responses for stroke, you know, something like 2K will check her, or you can try to call out backdash with something like a 5S. The other thing is, you have to be sure to beat HCL, because if you throw out like this is such a good counter for HCL. It beats Scooter. I don't know why you can't Scooter under, but you can dash under. So weird, but sure. So sometimes you'll just have to dash forward and get that punish. But normally that's surprisingly good against Ino is 2H, because 2H actually stops all these options as long as you're in range, right? So if you're in this range and she happens to the HCL, that works. If she happens to get up and dive, right, you're gonna make her pay really bad for that. So sometimes in this matchup, I actually like doing just dash up 2H if I'm trying to call out, one of these RPS options. And of course, right when you get in, make sure you use that DP. A lot of people are afraid to DP against Ino, but if Ino's doing something like a low, or they're doing like a jump normal into another jump normal, DP is really good against that, right? She has to take a lot of mitigation efforts to stop that. So don't be afraid to use that DP. Make sure you block high a lot more than anything else, because Inos like to block high. But make sure you rotate your options between backdash, 6P, DP, throw, etc., etc. The more options you present, the more that the Ino player has to account for, and it makes it a lot harder for the Ino to defend. As a round start, her 2S beats like everything. So yeah, you have to really respect 2S. Literally don't have a counter for it. I think personally the best option is just try to back off of an air dash or back off of a back dash, or blocking this isn't the worst because they can cancel the stroke, and that's your turn.
Versus Jacko.
All right, so Jacko, I think the key to beating Jacko is in making sure that you get in on her and stop the minions, right? So what I mean by this, I think one of the best ways to deal with minions is making sure you hit them, right? So I think you have a couple viable options to hit them. You can either try to 6P them, or you can try to 2H them. And again, it's a little trickier than you think, but eventually you'll get it. The cool thing about doing one of these normals is that you have really, really good cancel options, right? So you can do something like a 6P into the orb to try to check them if they're doing something else. If you think they're going to back off, you can 6P in the scooter. You're plus on that scooter, right? So there's a lot of good options you can rotate after hitting the minions. So Jacko has this jump D. It's very good against Bridget because, if Bridget's trying to roll in or do something like scooter, it'll stop that. But you actually have a couple good options to stop this, right? You can JH into JS, get a full combo, although it's, not gonna lie, it's pretty tricky. Yeah, I got it there, but yeah, you have to definitely practice that one. And you can also 2H. As long as you're early enough, you can do preemptive. Sometimes it'll trade, and you get a trade combo as well. I'd probably keep the wall there, just Jacko's the character I think wins neutral against Bridget, so you want to keep the pressure on. And then the other thing is again, you're one of the characters privileged enough to have a DP. Make sure you're DPing this. She has a really hard time stopping the DP after 2D. So even if she just decides not to cancel the 2D, you get a punish. So yeah, force Jacko to look out for that DP after sweep. As for round start, 2P is actually not a bad option. It stops Jacko's favorite round start, which is sweep, and deals pretty well with some other buttons. Of course, you can just always back off or do something like an air dash back to try to catch a sweep as well.
Versus Kai Keys.
All right, so Kai, I think the key against Kai is to stop the fireball. The fireball is really good, right? Because even if you throw out, right, it clashes with the orb, or if you're trying to do that stuff, it just takes away the pullback orb. I don't know what we're calling it. So yeah, learn how to beat the fireball. You have a couple different options here. One is I like to just super jump H fireball. That will actually punish as long as you're fast enough. But you don't really get that much damage. The issue is if you do it too low, you don't get to do your jump H spam. So even though I whiff, I can still get this out, right? And that's pretty oppressive to Kai. I mean, besides the fact that you can call out with a fireball. The other thing I like to do against Kai is you do have to air dash in, but I find Kai's a lot of times will answer with a 6P, right? And a very good call out to 6P is you can just do air dash this thing, right? At the right distance, you'll get that punish. One other thing about the Kai fireball, so let's say, I think sometimes you do have to dash block in. Let's say you dash block in, you block a fireball at this range. You're actually plus here. So you can check them with a 5H, or you can check them with, dash up if you think they're gonna be respectful, and you can kind of force your way in that way. The other thing you need to worry about in this matchup is Stun Dipper. Stun Dipper is probably the most obnoxious counter to Bridget's block strings. So if you're canceling at low profiles like frame 1, so you can't do this kind of stuff against Kai, right? So you have a couple different options, right? One, you could like just try to frame trap him close. You'll obviously catch him. You don't just not cancel because that will punish. But what you can do, like if you're this close, you can just YOLO scooter, especially if you have meter, you get a full combo off that. But another thing you can do, if you're like this spaced out, it doesn't matter if they stun dipper, right? Because they don't get the punish, and then you can, you know, get your full punish on the stun dipper and then get Oki. So another thing to keep in mind is Kai's DP is 11 frames, so you can do a lot of cool setups like a meaty scooter, for example, that will beat a DP that's on the slower side like Kai's. As a round start, oddly enough, 5k beats a lot of his options, but again, good Kai's will kind of look for the whiff and then try to whiff punish. So what I try to rotate between is like, you know, 5k and like a walk back bun, or just try to back off.
Versus Leo Whitefang.
All right, so Leo, I think the key to this matchup is just keep him out, honestly. You have really good options to keep him out. A lot of Leos will kind of poke with this. So a couple things you could do. You can try a whiff punish, but then this will happen. But, you know, just look out for that and whiff punish up that 2S. The fact that you have such a long reaching low is really good against Leo. Same thing with like fireballs. Leo can't really get away with fireballs from you. Let's say you block one, you can just kind of press 5H, counter hit the second one. Even if they do like H fireball, you know, you could trade, that trades in your favor. Or if you just preempt it, you get something like this. I'd say the other key to this matchup is making sure that you safe jump them, right? Make sure you get the safe jumps on deck, because if you get hit by a DP from Leo, you're not in a good situation, right? So make sure you're safe jumping these DPs, obviously after you know, after 2k2d. The other thing about DP is that, you know, my normal DP punish against Leo doesn't work, so you do have to learn a new DP punish. This is what I've been using. And right, and then you get a safe jump after that if you're close enough to the corner. There's actually more optimal variations like this, right? You can do something like this into this, get that double extended, and then go straight for a wall break. But yeah, make sure you have a DP combo against Leo, because if you try to do the day one bread and butter against Leo, it'll just whiff, and yeah, you'll be sad. As a round start, you know, Leo's like to RPS pretty hard in round start in my opinion, from just delayed button to something like a round start DP. So I like to back off, right? Just try to get into your neutral space and, you know, poke with that 5H, counter hit something, then go for safe jump pressure.
Versus May.
All right, so let's talk about May. So I think the key against May is to not let her get in. And I think the most obnoxious thing May has is this air dash JS, because you think, oh, let me just 6P and it'll work unless you're a frame too late, and then it'll trade or it'll just completely lose. One thing you can do against this is you can just try to air throw, and it's not too bad. Trying to react to it, but I would favor this over trying to just 6P. It's also very important to know your RPS against Dolphin, right? So Dolphin's really strong. A lot of Mays will like do Dolphin in reaction to like some of your moves. So like, let's say I do this and like, I'll be all right, time to Dolphin, right? But of course, Dolphin is minus. It's even minus on hit, but you have pretty good options. And 5P is a very, very, very good check against Dolphin. Pretty much the only thing May can do back to that is 6P, and you can, you know, just wait to whiff punish the 6P. So against Dolphin, I like to rotate 5P, a button to catch like a backdash, because that's usually the most normal response from May, is try to backdash so you can throw out 5S, or you can just wait and see what they're gonna do and like try to catch the jump with a 2H or whiff punish the 6P. Other than that, yeah, I think your standard gameplay of, you know, throw out orb and 214S if they're being respectful and then going in, I think it's all very effective against May. But yeah, you just have to watch that air approach, and then once she's in, she just explodes you, right? So make sure you block well. As for round start, your 5P will beat 5S from May, but a lot of Mays will just wait for it and then they'll whiff punish. The other thing is that, you know, May's 5K will beat your 5P, so you do have to be a little scared on round start. I'd like to just wait and occasionally throw out the 5P if I think they're gonna throw out something meaty like 5S.
Versus Millia Rage.
All right, so Millia, I think the key to the Millia matchup is keep her out of the air. Unfortunately, I think that's easier said than done. You do have some tools though. You would think like, oh, let me just 2H Millia out of the air. Unfortunately, it's not that easy. You know, due to Millia's new ability, she can make 2H whiff pretty easily. So while you do want to use 2H, you have to use it very tactically, right? Air to air is pretty good. I find like just doing like a jump back JS, if you think they're going to approach, is really strong. And your reward from this is obviously really good as long as you can convert it. Can be a little tricky, of course. But you get the idea. Once you keep her out of the air, she's going to want to approach on the ground, and obviously there's the RPS situation going on there. Millia's, again, one of these fast characters you want to prefer 5S, because they're not really going to counter hit anything from here. So you want to shoot for 5S just so, you know, if she does take to the air, you can recover quicker and punish her. This is a matchup where I actually think H236H is pretty good. Like if you're just going to snipe her out of the air, or you can like, you know, challenge with your really good air normals too. You can just kind of, you know, fly around and do this kind of stuff. I think it's actually pretty good against Millia. A lot of times you'll like clip under her with the roll and you'll get a punish. Oh, and one other thing, there's option selects that every character can use, right? And I think one of the important ones for Bridget is to learn this DP option select, where if Millia happens to cross you up. All right, so let's say Millia does this mix up and you want a DP. If they cross you up, let's say I do the cross up DP input, right? You'll hit her right out of the cross up, and this only comes out if they cross up, right? So the way you do this, you just do a reverse DP and you do a punch and kick, and it'll only come out if they are on the other side. So pretty important to learn this matchup. As for round start, I think 5P is actually pretty good. It'll beat even some things that you think would lose, like tandem top. It can also stop like the run-ins and that sort of thing. Other than that, just back off. There seems to be a pretty common theme here. You know, it's usually 5P or back off, and no different against Millia.
Versus Nagoriyuki.
All right, so I think the key against Nago, I love Nago, by the way, favorite character to fight against, is honestly don't lose round start, because his round starts are really explosive and you can lose the game off literally one touch, right? 5P is very strong against him. It pretty much beats every round start. If he starts doing like 6P to counter the 5P, then, you know, whiff punch the 5P. But once you get past this round start, you know, make sure you get him to spend the blood. Once he's at 2 bars of blood, he's not going to do this, or he's not going to do the clone, and then you could start throwing out these, right? Because you don't want to throw out the orb when he has clone, because you're just going to get full comboed. But once he has 2 bars of blood, you can safely throw this out and you can work on whiff punishing, right? So as you know, Nagos, when they have 2 bars of blood, they'll focus on doing this, they'll focus on doing this. You can actually check it pretty well. Obviously that's 0 bars of blood, but you know, make it whiff and then either throw an orb and go for this stuff, or just try to counter poke it with 5H, get your knockdown and do a really good mix. But when he has 2 bars of blood, he really has to respect orb. He also has to respect this too, especially if he's in the corner. You really want him to get in the corner into like this situation, and then he has to, you know, really respect your the orb pullback, and then you get free pressure off that, right? Force him to use his blood and then play really reactionary after he gets 2 bar, and then try to take as less risk as you can, get in, and then do really good mix.
Versus Potemkin.
All right, so Potemkin, this is an interesting matchup. I actually think this might be Bridget's easiest matchup. I think he has really hard time stopping this, right? He can Mega Fist, but you have a very good counter to Mega Fist, which is 2H. You just blow him up. So it's focusing on, you know, abusing that. One thing I think is very strong from Potemkin is back Mega Fist in the corner. How I find a lot of these Potemkin matchups that I lose will go is that I'll be very dominant in neutral, and I'll get him into the corner, and then he'll do this, and then I die. So make sure you're avoiding that, right? And it's a little harder to avoid than you think, right? So let's say you're doing just a normal block string into scooter, like I want to RC. Oh, well, can't do that against Potemkin, right? So you have to do, you know, stuff like this. Or even that doesn't work, right? So a few ways to call this out. You know, stuff like I can do like that into 2H and then get the trade combo. You can also just throw this orb up there like that. You know, throw out the orb and then check him when he comes down with like a 5H. And even like something like, you know, if they're doing a knockdown or something, just run up 2H is pretty good. Because again, Potemkin's like they're gonna do like a delayed back Mega Fist, like try to react to something, and then you can 2H that, not on reaction but preemptively, because he has a hard time dealing with that, right? And then you can call that out, and then you just make him explode, right? So the goal is, I guess his goal is like, just don't get oops, because that's what Potemkin is very, very good at doing. And so round start, I actually think 2H is pretty good because it'll counter the Mega Fist on round start in case they happen to do that. But yeah, you know, 5P, everything else, your standard game. Get away from him, abuse neutral, get in.
Versus Ramlethal Valentine.
All right, so Ramlethal. I think the key in this matchup is don't get counter hit by 5S and 5H, right? It can be really tricky and really tempting to kind of play in this range, right? Because you both have normals, and if you get a counter hit, you get to, you know, do your good mix up. But the thing is, if you do your normal, and again, it's not as disjointed as Rams, and you get counter hit, you die. If you're close enough to the corner, you're wall broken, and you took more than half your health. The risk reward to doing a 5H compared to Ramlethal's 5S or 5H is way in Ramlethal's favor. So you really want to focus on playing reactionary, right? Making sure that you're either whiff punishing or you're staying well out of the range, right? Like if you're trying to like catch a preemptive like dash, and then it's okay to throw a 5S. But I would not be pressing buttons in this range trying to hope to counter at the startup. I think that's like the biggest trap in this matchup, right? And once you get out of this range, they're gonna want to approach. You know, you can throw your orb, you can do this game, look out for the anti-air, but try to play the matchup in this range. The other thing that, you know, is obviously really good for Ram is this, right? Because if they get counter hit, they're just gonna explode you. So make sure you shut down the flip, and you have a really good counter for the flip, which is just 5k, because you get hella damage off of it. All right, so this is an example combo, but it's very important to stop that flip, and your 5k, you can do a lot later than you think, and it's really good at stopping the flip. See how late that was. Try not to jump too much, because Ramlethal 6P is really, really good, and she gets a lot of reward off of it. So again, try to play in this range, and only jump if you think a 5S or a 5H is coming.
Versus Soul Bad Guy.
All right, so let's talk about Soul. I think Bridget actually does pretty well against Soul. The key in this matchup is to abuse the stubbiness on his normals, right? He has a really hard time dealing with this. The fact that he has to run in and doesn't have like a really good whiff punish for this, you can just kind of abuse that. He's gonna have to do stuff like run up 6P, which is like really risky, right? Because if he just whiffs, then, you know, you get a combo and to start your pressure. And obviously as a DP, but you can, you know, play around that play a little more passively, right? But you win neutral pretty hard in this matchup, and it's gonna force the Soul player to do, you know, stuff like this, or stuff like, you know, this, or stuff like air dash in into whatever this move is. So make sure you're stopping everything, right? This move I think is actually pretty strong because you don't get a good punish against Soul for this, right? So sometimes you do want to just preempt this with a 2H and stop it before it comes out. Another thing is, if they do this move, you're lucky enough to have a low profile in the 2K, so make sure you 2K after the Bandit Revolver, and look out for this, especially if they have meter. It's a pretty good counter to like you throwing out fireballs, so you know, make sure you're being a little careful with the 236S, because Soul does have a decent counter to it. And round start, again, game plan, get away, occasionally check with 5P.
Versus Testament.
You know, a lot of things that Testament has that works on other characters doesn't necessarily work on Bridget because how long your pokes are. So it's making sure that you stop Testament autopilot offense. So what do I mean by that? So stuff like this, where a lot of characters could maybe, you know, not really do anything, you get a punch. Something like this string, which is like pretty obnoxious to deal with, right? You can poke out after the fireball. But let's say they do the charge fireball, right? And then they go in the crow. All right, so an example block string, right? You can dash block and then punish the crow before it comes out, right? So don't let Testament get away with some of this offense. The other thing is a fireball in neutral. Orb is actually pretty good against this. It beats the fireball. Kind of weird. You know, usually the orb's pretty bad against fireball, but against Testament's fireballs, it's pretty decent. Another thing you can do is you can do this like tiger knee orb too at this height, because if you're like a little slow on the reaction, you can jump over the fireball and then throw an orb. You can also do it with the other orb too, You just want to be careful. I like doing the S version because even if it whiffs, you know, you get to abuse your flying JH, right? This is just an example of like if you're, you know, countering the fireball into the crow autopilot offense, right? Like even if you're like really late and you TK at the right height, you can snipe that out with the fireball. All right, so the last thing about Testament is their reversal is really bad. The other thing is this is really good, right? So try not to be in the air against Testament. A lot of the things that you'd have, like, you know, you're falling JD, it doesn't work that well against Testament because their 6P is just really, really good. And you can do a lot of like reversal safe stuff. So a move like this that would be not safe versus other reversals is actually safe versus Testament. So, you know, try to stick to reversal safe options when you can because they're pretty easy to do.
Versus Zato 1.
All right, and the last character on the list, Zato. The key to Zato, and pretty much every character's key to beating Zato, is making sure you kill Eddie. But thankfully, Bridget actually has a few decent options to kill Eddie. One example is this move. If you just do the normal orb, this will clash with the orb and beat that. But if you Tiger Knee the yo-yo, it'll actually go over the drills and it'll beat the Zato drills. Very useful. So this basically beats most of Zato's Eddie options. So make sure you kill the Eddie, and then once you get in, you know, obviously abuse. Doing stuff like Scooter is really strong too, right? Because you can like scoot into this, or you can like scoot into oppose and RC, or even just like using break to trade with the Eddie. I think they're all really good options. So between using the orb and the scoot, you can kill Eddie decently in neutral, right? Obviously Eddie has counterplay, like going into oppose to tank a hit, and then once your orb's already out, you know, using Eddie to approach you. But once you get out, you know, approach, and all you really have to worry about is this drill. And drills can be kind of obnoxious, but keep in mind you are plus, so you can do something like this, and they're either gonna like 6P or back off, and you have to kind of guess what they're gonna do, but you have pretty good options to deal with that, right? The other thing I would say is if they are summoning, like let's say they're doing something like this, don't let them get away with these summons, right? The only thing they can really do to beat that is like go straight into drill. But that's barely any damage unless they have RC, right? So make sure you're calling out these summons. And don't let him get pressure for free. All right, anyways, guys, hey, I took a lot of effort to make, not gonna lie. So if you guys appreciate this kind of content, hey, consider like, sharing, and subscribing. Really helps out the channel. You know, I'm trying to become stronger in Guilty Gear, trying to, you know, improve in other funny games like Street Fighter 6 and Project L when that comes out. So if you want to see my journey across that and support the channel, consider like, sharing, and subscribing. And also comment down below if there's essential tips to you know, the matchups you think I forgot. Obviously there's a lot I could cover for each matchup, but try to keep it short and concise for you guys, just you know, simplify things. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time, and I hope this helped.